Hi, and welcome to Viewmaster Travels. In this episode, we're exploring an obscure place very few people know about. It's real SP9031, Petersen's Rock Gardens. The reel has 7 pictures of strange rock structures that are somewhere in central Oregon, a very curious sight indeed. We were driving through Oregon and realized the garden should be nearby, so I had to take a detour to see if it was still there. Here's the first vintage picture we were looking for. Lily Pond. Petersen's Rock Gardens had stuck in my mind ever since finding the curious reel in a large collection. It seemed like some kind of quirky set of rock structures you could explore. It was a rainy, gray, and chilly day when we left Route 97 to cut across to the Old Bend-Redmond Highway and then into farmland, following the GPS to coordinates I'd found on the internet. We'd seen no signs that the rock garden still existed, and were worried it'd be a wasted trip. The GPS said arrived, so we pulled off the road onto a farmer's driveway and found ourselves surrounded by a flock of peacocks, and all around us were strange rock formations, so we knew we were in the right place. We were the only people there, and I wasn't really sure it was open, so we parked and just started wandering around. The gardens are 4 acres filled with many different structures made from all kinds of rocks, and as much as it didn't seem it from the road, it was truly fascinating. It was all built by one man, Rasmus Petersen. So let's take a look at the next Viewmaster picture and then learn more about him. The Wishing Well. My Viewmaster reel's pretty old and not in the greatest condition. Looking at the 3D pictures never really gave a sense of exactly what you were looking at, but being there we could see it was a whole bunch of handmade walk-through structures built out of exotic rocks. There's castles and grottos, fountains and little bridges, and a staggering collection of different rocks and minerals. Rasmus Petersen was born in Denmark in 1883. He moved to Nebraska in 1901 and went to a Danish school. This was one of only 5 Danish schools in the US. Another one was in Solvang, California, which was the subject of an earlier episode. And you can see the Scandinavian influence in what he built here. When he graduated, he decided to take advantage of a law called the Desert Land Act, which would let him claim a plot of land as long as he could irrigate and develop it. He and 4 friends chose land in Central Oregon, arriving in the winter of 1906. After some years of struggle, he managed to develop a successful farm, which quickly expanded to 256 acres, and he became a key figure in the community. In 1935, as war loomed and the Depression lingered, he began building the rock garden outside his house. Here's one of his more famous constructions. Flag of lava cinders and obsidian. This view is quite similar to the Viewmaster one, although the trees have grown significantly and the peacocks have laid their claim. It's right in front of a small museum, which Petersen built in 1941 after buying a large rock collection from local collector Guy Compton, who had been accused of murder the year before, so maybe Petersen got the collection cheap. Compton was eventually acquitted. Turns out, though, Petersen didn't know anything about geology. He just collected rocks that he thought looked nice. Everything came from within 100 miles of his home. He'd trek out with his truck and a block and tackle and bring back huge loads of rocks. The rock gardens are on the edge of a range of 18 volcanoes called the Cascade Arc, and many of the rocks he found are volcanic in origin. The flag's red stripes are made of red cinder, which is actually named scoria, rocks formed when lava blobs are thrown into the air and cool. They're filled with gas bubbles, which leave lots of little holes in the rock. Scoria has been used as a building material since Roman times. Scoria from Mount Vesuvius was used in the dome of the Pantheon, and scoria from a small volcano on Easter Island was used for part of their famous Moai statues. The border and building above the flag have lots of obsidian collected from the glass buttes. Obsidian is a glass formed when silica-rich lava cools quickly. The silica prevents the molecules in the lava from organizing into crystals, creating an amorphous solid that's smooth and very sharp. It's named after Absidius, a Roman explorer who described Ethiopian obsidian, and it's been traded in North America by people for thousands of years. There are all kinds of varieties of obsidian, and I was amazed by how many you could see in one place. There's also lots of beautiful agates collected from the Harney Basin, which is over here in eastern Oregon. Agates are formed in volcanic rocks as gas bubble holes are slowly filled with silica-rich fluids that crystallize into colorful gems trapped within the rock. Once he had some rocks to work with, he'd make wooden molds and fill them with concrete, and then press the smaller rocks into it. He'd use these stone panels as the walls of his constructions, like a mineral gingerbread house. This new hobby really started to take over, and he started selling off parcels of his farm to fund his rock collecting obsession. Castle and Statue of Liberty. This one's a small island with bridges crossing over to it, and you can climb hidden stairs right up to the miniature Statue of Liberty. The whole thing's got a charming handmade appeal, like this crazy tilting castle thing, which does remind you of Scandinavian churches. There was one image on the Viewmaster called Fluorescent Display, which we couldn't find anywhere. There was a miniature village built out of fluorescent rocks at one point, or as this Bend Bulletin article says, rocks that glow in eerie colors when exposed to radioactive lights. I think it was in the museum, but it was closed when we got to it. It took Petersen 2 years to build the large grotto outside the museum building, and 2 more years to make the island to the south, including this lighthouse and suspension bridge. The big oval grotto, including the Statue of Liberty, was built between 1944 and 46, and then he moved on to all these large vignettes around the parking lot. He did very little advertising, relying entirely on word of mouth, and to help spread the word, he hired the Sawyers Company, the maker of Viewmasters, to do a series of black and white postcards. Later, he had them come back to create the 3-dimensional full-color Viewmaster reel we're looking at in 1950. By 1952, the garden was at the peak of its popularity, with 125,000 people visiting annually, and Petersen had all kinds of plans to add new things. The visitors are still increasing, he said, but I am running out of rocks. Petersen's Rock Gardens and the Three Sisters. This one shows the state of decay you could see everywhere today. I think this is about where the Viewmaster photographer was, but now the pond is entirely full of reeds, with just the peaks of the suspension bridge showing, and new trees block the view of the Three Sisters mountain range entirely. Rasmus Petersen died suddenly while sitting by the museum's fireplace near his radioactive lights in 1952. He was 69. The property went to his wife, Nyleta, who managed her husband's garden for the next 35 years. She did a lot more advertising in the newspaper, added a miniature train, cafeteria, and more peacocks, as well as the swan boats in the pictures. She managed to keep up with the maintenance well into the 70s, at which point she said that 300,000 people were visiting each year. But slowly the garden declined. The swan boats were eventually removed because the children had fights in them, she said, using them like bumper cars. And a short-lived experiment with a real swan went south because of its pugnacious attitude toward visitors. And I love this line. There's a possibility that the ill-tempered swan originally was part of the Mirror Pond brood, like it came from a vicious swan gang or something. Nyleta died in 1987, and the gardens passed down to her daughter, Adele Heggert, who died in 2010, and ownership went to her daughter, Susan Kayward. But by then, the rock gardens were in real trouble. Agates, crystal, and petrified wood. When Susan Kayward inherited the gardens, it had just been listed as one of Oregon's most endangered places. And then, the next year, a contractor crashed his truck into one of the rock bridges, severely damaging it. This drew the attention of the Historic Preservation League of Oregon, who raised $2,500 to help nominate the garden to the Registry of Historic Places. The gardens temporarily closed down, and a company named Topa 3D came in to 3D laser scan the entire property over 6 days. Historian Michael Hall carefully studied the area and completed a 114-page description of the site for the Historic Register application. Their efforts paid off, and the garden was listed on the Register of Historic Places on October 30th, 2013. But as we've seen before in Lincoln Land, this achievement didn't help much, and the gardens closed entirely in 2016 and were put up for sale in 2022. A buyer was found by the end of that year with high hopes to restore the property and reopen it to the public, but when we visited a year after that, we weren't sure if we were really supposed to be there and it looked abandoned. Turns out there is a caretaker, Craig Fox, looking after the property, doing the best he can to arrest the decay and feed the peacocks, and I think he gives occasional tours. The gardens are an oasis of creativity in the high Oregon desert that has endured many challenges and transitions over the last 90 years. I didn't know anything about Oregon's geology before visiting the rock gardens, and now I know about the towering volcanoes, obsidian lava flows, and ancient river canyons that exist there. This is all due to Rasmus Petersen's vision. One man's obsession has become a monument to the geologic diversity of this fascinating place, and I'm reminded of the importance of preserving such cultural treasures, and I do hope the current owners manage to keep it open. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching.